Alrighty, so now we are starting with the goodness gracious, um, the guns. So I rolled these guns. I did one already, the barrels, I guess, and it came out. But what I had to do was I delaminated. So I took some paper off. The issue was it rolled well, but then see all that black? That's from a Sharpie that I used to color the inside of the barrel. So I might need to have to repaint them both anyway. But anyway, so delaminating sometimes helps to roll those. They're not easy though. Then that's part of a breech component that folds over. That one I didn't delaminate. I only delaminated the one piece for the actual barrel. And everything is, in this case, this little piece gets glued onto like a coupler, this little piece, and all I'm doing, and that was just a tiny little kind of a cone, cut off cone shape, very easy to do, that's why I didn't show you, but I line up the seams. So see, I rolled that until the seam was the right way, and then I go ahead and pop those puppies on. And then you just spend some time making sure it's even, like see it's way off, but you just play around with it until you got it straight, until you've got it so that it looks good, and all that glue will dry clear, so again, that's nothing to worry about as usual. And I kind of roll it around and make sure it's straight. Then I offered up the barrel to that part, and again, initially matching up the seams, and then spending time to just make sure that it looks good. If you just make sure that it is straight, and what I do is get it on there and get it to dry. Excuse me. And then I kind of twist it in my fingers and make sure it doesn't kind of roll around or rattle around funny. And there it is. Looks pretty good. So that's what's going to go into the mantle. And it's going to look like this. So you can see that just goes in. It's butted up against a bulkhead. And then on the very tips, on the end, there are these little flappers that close. I don't know if you can see it. See those? There's like my guess is it would have been like a worm gear that you would roll all the way in the back at the breech of the gun, and then that would open and close that little garage door. And there it is. And it has a little white spot on it to show you where the barrel lines up. So that just requires you to grab a little bit of glue on the end of the barrel. And what I did to position it is just plop it on that little door piece and just line it up onto that white circle. Very easy to do. And then take some time to make sure it's right. I'm making sure that the seam is opposite the flat part, so the seam is down. The round part on the door should be on the bottom of the barrel. And there it is. Looks great. Looks just fine. Now you got to spend some time making that little connector, which I made out of pulled sprue, very thin plastic. First, you put this little pulley on the end, which is a little tiny piece that goes up on the top. In 1/200 scale, this looks fine. The real McCoy is a little more complicated than this, but again, not to worry. What I do is I lick my X-Acto blade, and then that picks up a piece of paper with ease, with pinpoint accuracy. So, there that is. You just make sure that it holds in, make sure it's relatively straight, and make sure you do a good job of taking pictures. And there is your finished gun, except for the one cable piece or the one wire piece that goes down. It's kind of hard to make. What I had to do was, there's a bend in it down here where it hits the coupler area. So I grabbed the piece of plastic, and because the plastic's so thin, you can almost bend it like it's wire or something. You bend one angle, and then you grab it and you bend it the other way. And what that does is make it so it follows the contour of that base where the barrel attaches to the rest of the gun right there. It needs a little more bending, but that's how it's going to fit. And ultimately, I believe this one, you see how curvy it is? I pulled a new one that I actually put on later that looked better, because it was a little bit when you pull these plastic and heat it and pull them, if you're not careful, like I wasn't, you end up sort of holding it in a funny way, and it will start to curl on you, which is what this piece did. So, but the idea is here: bend it, and then put it right there so it runs along the middle, and then you attach it to the little round piece. So there it is, right there. And you can see, I'm trying to put my hands there, but you can see how they look. Now, jury's out if I'm going to paint those or not, because that black doesn't look that bad on the right barrel up there, but it isn't too good either. I will probably end up painting those, but that's, again, not the kit's fault. That's me not thinking. But it looks pretty good. And it looks even cooler when you put it on the deck, because now, I guess I'm calling this a conning tower, but I guess it's not. Superstructure might be a better word, but anyway, all this stuff is neat. In the original, this actually could turn. You could turn those guns. Right there where that seam is was an articulation point. So now we got to put that part on, which again is superstructure, where there's some guns and where some guys would stand. And this thing was a pain in the posterior. It doesn't look bad. That piece is right there, and then the two deck pieces are there and here. So that piece goes there, and then the wooden deck part goes in the back where those lines are. Then there's a shroud that goes over the whole thing right here that makes it all have the actual superstructure shape. And because the inside is white, there's an additional piece right here that goes in there to give you the to color the inside so it's not white. This also provides you with, see that right angle there, that provides you with a place to attach these pieces. So when you glue those in, you'll be able to attach them right there. In theory, it all works well. The problem is that part 69, that little thin piece of paper, it really needs to be a thicker piece. See, that piece can fit up there, although, coming out towards the camera. So the first thing I did was add that little thin piece of paper. There's a white crown on it there, and so that's where this piece goes and attaches to that part, just based on what the drawing looks like. I was working on my car earlier, so my hands are all filthy. So that's good. I put it on the table to make sure it's flat and make sure that it lines up, and that's a one-to-one drawing, which is kind of nice. And there it is. Then you put the other piece on, and it's going to fit right like that, right on top. Or I guess right up against it, which will be perfect. So this piece now, again, I'm trying to show you how it fits. And again, it's kind of weird. That little piece is supposed to be in the center, and that curve fits very nicely to this curve. But what I should have done is not curved anything. I should have put this all together when it was all flat. My problem is I didn't know what that green piece was at first. Only later, when I was putting it together, did I say, oh, that's what it needs. In fact, I was planning myself to make sure I paint the inside with my greenish color. Well, it turns out they did it for you. They have this piece that comes around and shapes it for you. I guess it also strengthens that top piece, makes it a little thicker. But that seam there, that's going to be at the apex right there at the tip, that's going to be something I'm going to have to address. It's never going to look real good. Now, what I did with this was I add a little piece of cardboard into that joint so that it's kind of square and gives a little bit more strength. I'm hoping that helped. I ended up putting actual right angle triangles under there ultimately, because that piece of paper is a hard thing to use. Now, I'm going to put some glue and up in that right angle and start on one side. So put glue along here and along there, and along the front and the back, and just try one side to get this thing in, get that deck part in. It has to be flush with the edging, and it should work fine. And when I test fit it, it did sort of look pretty good. I mean, I put it in there, but then once you added glue, as usual, things didn't go quite well. Plus, again, doing this on the camera is hard because I'm not looking directly at my parts. I'm kind of looking off kilter at it, kittywampus at it. And so that makes it very difficult to make things actually come together. So when I test fit this, it worked great. When I did it for the camera, it looks okay, but I will just tell you, I ended up pulling it apart and redoing it because it did not look as good as it needed to, and because it is glued in the first place, what that led to was some scruffy edges and things. But the gist of it is here. If you want to put this together, this is how you would do it. It's just that in your case, you do it correctly. But line that right up in there like that, and you can see it fits really well. There's an angle right in there. And then the back deck fits back there, that edging, and it's flush with the top of the wooden deck. And then you do the same thing with the front. That front piece just is cut, and it rolls right over, passes right over the top of the forward deck. And then you put that little, the front piece there, that ribbon piece, on the front green deck. And just making sure all of this is flush and flat. And again, this is all correct. I mean, this is how you I guess you should do it. And then here I am putting in the other side. And then this is where things went pear-shaped, as they say. Everything's okay so far, but I didn't have it, I guess, quite centered, I guess. And so when I actually went to look at it when it was finished, it actually had a curve in it. The superstructure had a noticeable bend in it. Not huge, but it wasn't straight like it was. And you can see that right angle is not adding up. It's not matching up perfectly. It's close, but it looks pretty good on camera. Believe me, it wasn't. And I didn't know that, so I dutifully squeezed all these things together and made sure this sucker was glued to stay. And you can almost see once in a while the wooden deck. You can see it's at an angle. And I'm not noticing this at this point until I, actually look at it. And it's not a huge angle, but I'm making dang sure this thing is glued together. And again, I ended up taking it all apart. I might even show you doing that, so that it's nice to see when things don't go well too. It's like when people with car videos have something and they say, here's a trick to this, getting out this bolt, and it's really important to know how to do this. And then they cut to the finished product and they say, well, if you know that trick, everything's fine. That doesn't help anybody. Here I am basically making sure that it's flush and making sure it's glued. Like here, it's not glued on quite well enough. So I got to go back in and add a little glue. But you get the gist of what it's supposed to look like. And it's actually pretty neat. When it's all done. It'll take a couple bits of touch-up paint here and there, but it looks awesome. And all those white numbers are going to be where other pieces go on, which are very simple. You just build them and glue them on. So the one that says 90, I think that's a gun. There's two of them in the back. And the one that says 85 is some kind of, what I think is some kind of homing radar-ish kind of thing. And there you can see the bend a little bit. But there I went on the underside and tried to put some glue in to make sure that it was all nice and tight and glued. And again, only after I did this did I realize, it ain't right. And so I have to fix it. I mean, maybe I could have lived with it, but I think it would have been pretty funny. You can see there, look at that, how it's bent towards the back where the wood is. Right now I'm looking at it and I'm twisting it and I'm going, can I kind of force it into place? Can I sort of push it so that it's, a little better? And I try to figure, I know I need to pull this one side back somehow. But you can see there's not a chance because it's glued all the way around. But I thought, is there a way? Sometimes you can kind of maybe have a little kink somewhere in part of the paper. And here's where I'm realizing I already destroyed that one piece it's bent. But here's where I'm realizing that you're basically up a creek. You're going to have to take it off. So to take this off, I really only had one casualty, which I'll show you later. But I basically peeled it off. I used an X-Acto blade to come in here. And then afterwards, I sanded everything down a little bit because you left with little bits of paper because the glue works great. Dang it. Works really well. So here I'm just slicing it off. And again, this isn't how you're supposed to do it, but it might help people realize that these things don't always work out like you wish they would. So I ended up pulling all that stuff off again. And I ended up ripping one little piece, which I think with some glue and some TLC, it'll be better. And then the actual deck, doesn't have a pronounced bend in it, bow in it anymore. So I'm glad I did it, even though it was a pain to do. Yes, I swore lots. There it is, much better. But look at there. there's a nice rip, which again with some paint touch up I think will be okay. That does not look very good. And you can see there's a bend over there. And the edges need to be cleaned up. And so it's not as good as it was initially, which is a real shame. There are these pieces of balsa triangle I put in to give it more strength, because I think that was part of the issue. Here I'm just trying to make sure that, for instance, I haven't pushed, as you're pushing this together, you tend to bend the paper. And I want it to fit over that white piece. See that white that's on the top of the superstructure there? And it actually fits nice, which again, beautiful engineering. But there's some white showing, and the question is, can I get rid of that? And the answer is, ultimately, yeah, I could. Or most of it, by basically taking a round implement. I used a piece of, I think, aluminum tubing, and kind of pushed against it, my fingers out there giving it some support. I'm not trying to pull the glue apart, I'm just trying to very carefully splay the piece out, because it's actually pushed in a little bit. If you look at it end on, it's a little squished. And so you do that a few times. It took maybe, I don't know, 3-4 times doing that, front and back, and you can see it's getting less and less white. And I kept doing that, and the finished product is just a little bit of white, but it's not so much that it's going to be hard to touch up. I'm going to have to, as I said, touch up the superstructure anyway because of the tear in it, and also the buckle that I have in it. But it's battle damage. Although I don't think this thing ever fired a shot in anger, I'm not sure. But there, if you kind of burnish it like that, and you're just pushing the paper out a weeny bit, and when you do that, this fits right over, and it's a complex shape to fit, and it fits great. I mean, you know, how again the model is designed in a very nice way, because all that stuff's separate, and it all fits like a glove. It fits very well. So then I just played around with this until I got it right. And when I got it to where I liked it, I started with some glue on. I put a fair amount on, and then I took off the excess, as you'll see. But I wanted a fair amount on there because this has got a glue. There's no other way to glue it. It's just edge glued. And I put this down, and you'll see some glue squooch out, but that doesn't matter. That gets removed, and it dries, so not a problem. A little bit of glue looks bad, but don't panic. And what I did was made sure it's pressed down, and then I took a paintbrush, an old paintbrush, and I licked it, but you could stick it in a little bit of water, and you just sort of wipe this stuff into the crevice. And that will have the glue basically act like a fillet almost, and it will get rid of the excess. I know you can't see what I'm doing, but I'm just kind of brushing it so that it kind of disappears. That big blob, it'll get brushed away. These pieces get brushed away. And when this all dries, it actually looks quite good. So there's no worry about it, ended up looking terrible. In fact, I might even take a bead, like I've done before on some of these, and put a bead of glue in these along this to strengthen it and also to give it sort of a fillet effect, because it helps hide seams, it's like an optical illusion. There's a little touch-up paint I need, but you can see on this side is that big rip, and that'll have to be addressed. But overall, it's not quite dry here yet, so it doesn't look that good. When it dried, it looks really nice. And notice those little white things are supposed to be places for a ladder, and they actually match up. I might even try to put little things to make them actually three-dimensional. We'll see if I get the courage to do that. But anyway, this thing is starting to look good, and putting all the other parts on will really help. I'm glad that the cannons look good, because that was something I thought was going to be a real pain and impossible to make them look good and straight and true and all that. They look fine. So this is wonderful. The next big thing will be adding this to the deck itself. And again, it looks really ratty where that glue seam is, but believe me, when it dries, it's not. So there it is. And sticking it on the deck really will make it look cool. But there's the front end with the cannons, and there's the rear with the deck. I don't know. I think that looks pretty dang good, in my humble opinion. So, pretty pleased.